Okay, thank you for feedback. We are restarting webinar. Today we have webinar on eCTD in Australia. Australia Au-TGA now recommends eCTD submission. Before starting webinar, I would like to give you brief introduction about Sargent system. Sargent has over 16 years of experience in business technology and innovations. Its core competence is greenfield project solutions. Sargent is 9001-2008 certified to bring quality in process. Sargent provides cloud-ready solutions and believes in invest in usage and not in implementation. For more details, you can visit sargent.com. These are few of Sargent's valued clients that include Inta, Zydus, Minarvini, Lambda, Cadila, Accord, Julic Pharma, and more. These are Sargent's regulatory software solution that includes KnowledgeNet for dossier processing, tracking, and submission. PVNet is drug safety database. BizNet is clinical trial management. QH is for quality management system. These are Sargent's business software solution. It includes PharmaNet for sales and distribution. FF reporting is for CRM, SFA, and e-detailing. Procage is for business process automation. Now I would like to give you a brief introduction about speaker Ms. Riddhi Doshi. She is senior consultant in regulatory affairs. She is experienced in world of regulatory development and solutions over 8 years. She is specialized in regulatory drug submission compilation and validation, lifecycle management, dossier publishing, strategy and planning development for dossier submissions. She is consultant in regulatory compliant products and have deep knowledge on regulatory submissions. Now I would like to call Ms. Riddhi to start webinar.
Hello everyone. Thank you for the introduction. Today I would be speaking on Au-TGA, the Therapeutic Good Administration, which is a part of Australian Government Department of Health and is looking towards moving to submit applications in electronic format to enter registered medicines into Australian registration of therapeutic goods. This happened when Au-TGA created a standard set of procedures, guidelines as agenda to implement the submission of medicine application using through electronic common technical documents. Firstly, I would be giving a brief introduction on eCTD and eCTD in Australia. Starting with eCTD introduction. That is, what is eCTD? eCTD, as known, Electronic Common Technical Document, is an interface for the pharmaceutical industry to agency to transfer regulatory information between them. The content is based on Common Technical Document (CTD) format. The technical format was developed and maintained by ICH, International Conference on Harmonization. eCTD submission is usually composed of three main things. One is the directory structure, the other is the files, that is the content file, and XML eCTD instance, that's the backbone of eCTD. There are basically two categories of the modules. Number one, module 1, that is the regional module, which contains regional information which varies from country to country, and other is common, that is from module 2 to module 5. And in eCTD there is common electronic environment. eCTD submission have mostly PDF leaf documents which are stored at a higher level folder structure. Access to the XML backbone known as index.xml, and with the file's integrity guaranteed by MD5 checksum. eCTD submission supports multilingual and multi-regional aspects. Now, we would like to know why eCTD. There are certain benefits of eCTD. As you can see in the screen, there are few major benefits of it, and I'll go through the benefits of it in detail. Having data in common electronic environment will allow the agency to regulate products quickly, eliminate difficulties with accessing, searching through, and finding data in paper form. The agency ultimately wants to create an electronic information exchange network to share with public, so that information can be traded between the Au-TGA, the agency, investors, healthcare professionals, patients, and other agencies. While electronic submission helps the agency speed, review, and share information, they also help companies too. Using the eCTD costs less for companies than paper submission, freeing up the resources that allows drug maker to focus on interpreting clinical data instead of handling that data. Backbone files come in extensible markup language, that's XML, to replace the usual portal document from PDF, table of content, because XML has more power to display data and information, creating greater efficiency for files. The book discusses how to transform the backbone from XML to HTML. In this webinar, you will learn the benefits of switching the eCTD and best practice for the new format, as well as the specifications, standards, and checklists for creating an eCTD protocol in your. So these are the basic benefits of eCTD. We'll move on. This is the eCTD folder structure, which has the first top level folder would be the submission ID or the tracking ID. Then goes the sequence number, and within it there is module 1. Module 1 is the contents of files in module 1 would be regional files, cover letter, the envelope information within module 1, and it is a country specific folder is being created, and within it all the files are there, and it creates exact country specific region file to pass through module 1 PDF files. Then comes the common folders, that is module 2 to module 5, and util folder. Util folder has DTDs and style sheets, that is module 1 schema file, ICH eCTD specific DTDs, and it also has index.xml and index MD5 checksum text file. This is the basic folder of eCTD. Now we will introduction of eCTD in Australian government market. eCTD is basically CTD plus XML and envelope elements. Currently, the Therapeutic Good Administration (TGA) is accepting dossier in niche format, and it highly recommends eCTD submissions. From January 5th, sponsors must submit their application using version 3.0 if submitting in the eCTD format. Right now the pivot phase is going on, wherein the version is 0.9 and it is valid up till 31st of December 2015. Until 31st December, application has the options to use either 0.9 version or 3.0 version for their electronic submission. But from January 1st, 2016, all the eCTD application must be submitted to TGA in version 3.0. We'll see how the evaluation is there in eCTD in Au-TGA. Firstly, as we can see, the published technical documents review on 29th was reviewed on 29 June 2014. Then a workshop on eCTD submission was held. That was on 3rd of July 2014. Pivot phase commenced on July 3rd, 2014. Comments on those technical documents which were prepared by agency were done on 4th of November 2014. There was a readiness of assessment of eCTD submissions from February 2015. Then TGA developed the final version of Australian eCTD specifications, that is version 3.0, on April 14, 2015. So the submissions in version 3.0 of the eCTD format will be valid till 1st of June 2015. And submission in pivot phase version 0.9 will be valid until 31st of December. And as said earlier, sponsors have to submit their application if they are submitting in eCTD format in version 3.0 from 1st January 2016. Before Australian embraced this system, eCTD format was already adopted by some of the world's largest regulatory bodies, including the US FDA, European Agency, and Japan Labour and Welfare. It was only in 2012 Australian eCTD framework was widely used by TGA in Australia so as to work closely with the pharmaceutical industry. Has been accepting paper and non-eCTD submission, that is NEES format of application. NEES is an electronic application. However, it is way behind the modern type of application which is implemented in many other parts of globe, namely eCTD. Australia is now moving forward in an effort to go ahead and implement eCTD. In the recent past, Australia has linked an agreement with an eCTD software vendor to receive, review and process electronic application for entry of prescription medicines and other therapeutic products onto ARTG. The nation is working closely with stakeholders and plans to implement this modern format for application by the end of 2014. Now we move forward to steps to file the dossier. It is for the business protocol for preparing your eCTD transaction. Firstly, we would be preparing the application. Preparing the application would validate the application along with the validation reports with regional DTDs. Preparing the files in PDF format, managing the content, and all goes within preparation of the application. Next would be obtaining the e-submission identifier. Company will need an e-submission identifier before submitting first regulatory activity for application in eCTD format. You will need an e-submission identifier before you submit first regulatory activity. To obtain an e-submission identifier, you would have to send an email to esubmission@tga.gov.au. Include the following information in your email: the application's name as listed in EBS client database, name of the medicine or subject of master file, a description of application, and name and address of the manufacturing site. The identifier is made of a letter with 6 digits, for example E12345, valid throughout the entire life cycle of product unless split from a packet as explained elsewhere. The next step after obtaining the e-submission identifier would be preparing of the cover letter. We have to include few following information in cover letter in addition to the CTD requirements of the cover letter. Firstly, the e-submission identifier, the sequence and the related sequence in the subject line consistent with eCTD envelope, a description of e-submission, the type and the number of electronic media which we are using, an approximate submission size, and any characteristics concerning the media that we might need to know. All this information would go in the descriptive format in the cover letter. Software generally used to check the files from viruses and statements as to whether submission is virus-free or not. The regulatory and information technology points to contact for the submission. A paper copy of cover letter should be included with the physical media containing the eCTD. This is only necessary until we develop an electronic portal. The next, after preparing the cover letter, the sponsor information would go. So how to collect the sponsor? What would be the sponsor information? It would regarding the changes, if there is any change, it would go regarding the change in sponsor in section 1.2.4. Then, which is actually not applicable, the sponsor details in section 1.3.1, application information with other details like change in address, change in contact, agent, etc. would go in the sponsor's information. Next would be structuring the application in folder structure. Use of application folder named after the e-submission identifier and include the sequence folder as subfolder in their content. As we have seen earlier, the folder structure, the first folder, the upper layer of the folder would be e-submission identifier, then would go the sequence number, then module 1 to module 5 folder structure would go, within which all the files, PDF files would be put down. So for example, in D:, the e-submission folder would be E12345 and the sequence number. Then the point would be validating eCTD sequence. There are three types of eCTD validation findings. First would be, if any, error, which is critical finding. Validation findings categorized and errors must be addressed. Non-compliance will lead to rejection of the sequence. There, after validating the sequence, you might get warning. Best practice recommendation. This is validation findings. The categories is warning should be addressed. By recommending warning be eliminated whenever possible. Repeated or excessive use may result in requests from the agency to fix up the sequence and resubmit it. And thirdly would be any information collected about the data being submitted. This includes a list of omitted possible documents as defining e-submission document matrix that might be required in sequence, or it would be unusual lifecycle operation or information about STF, that's study tagging file submission and etc. All this information would go in validation. Then it would be after compiling, after validating the sequence, there would be delivery of the sequence. Sending the application package, pack the cover letter and medial securely prior to sending. Delivery of the application to therapeutic goods administration through CD and DVD. The pack cover letter and media securely prior to sending. 2. For Australian Post, send to the postal address of electronic submission TGA, Post Box 100, and the address given in the Australian government page. Next step is import. import eCTD will be validated and imported by TGA for the review purpose, and system validation of eCTD would be done. Here we can also, while submitting there is selecting a media format, we can submit it through CD, DVD RAM or DVD recorded in universal disk format. Feedback on validation can be received. An agency will contact you if they have any issues during validation and or uploading the sequence. After this business protocol, after the submission, these are the basic few steps of submission of the sequence of the submission. Next goes publishing challenges while creating eCTD in Australia. Firstly, we'll go through the module 1, that is regional content. That is module 1, which is titled as module 1 administrative and prescription information. These are the PDF file, a general structure of module 1 in by Australian government. Module 1 consists of regional specific administrative and product information, and in module 3.2.R we should be used for any additional drug substance or drug product information specific to Australia. These are the basic, these are the envelope elements to be provided. The company needs to provide a separate element for each entry. Values, multiple values, entry while submitting multiple values in envelope as ANA, ANNA, product name and ARTG number. Firstly, we'll go briefly, I'll go through each and every element. It is e-sub identifier is e-submission identifier, which is mandatory. Sponsor will need an e-submission identifier before the submit your first regulatory activity for an application in eCTD format. The identifier is made up of 6 letters, 6 digits, E12345 for an example, and valid throughout the entire life cycle of the product unless split from a packet as explained elsewhere. Second is applicant. That is when the applicant is the name as listed in the EBS client database, for example, pharma.inc. Then comes AAN, that is Australian approved name, the name of the active ingredients that are accepted for inclusion in Australian approved name list, for example, amoxicillin. Managed is product name, the name or proposed medicine, trade name to be used on the certificate of registration, for example, increases pill. ARTG number, all applicable ARTG number if available. This can be 4, 5 or 6 digit number, for an example 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sequence description. Content description for submitting sequence should be one of the values from the defined list given by the authorities. For example, initial or response to request for information. In this case, a date is required as an additional data. Sequence number, the first sequence, that is 0000. It's a 4-digit sequence number matching the sequence folder been submitted. Related sequence number is used to group sequences within an e-submission. This enables to early value sequence associated with a particular regulatory activity. Regulatory activity lead identifies the group within the TGA which is expected to take the lead in the review process. Refer to this list is the defined list given by the authority. And sequence type. Sequence type identifies the type of the activity that is being submitted, either the regulatory activity type for the first sequence of the regulatory activity or the supplementary information for the regulatory activity. These are the envelope elements which are in XML backbone, which are attributes, which are also called as attributes or the metadata. An envelope has an element containing the appropriate metadata values describing the sequence. There are multiple defined values given by the authority for regulatory activity lead, sequence description and sequence type. This would be module 1 XML file, which after giving the envelope information. A folder structure of module 1. Now we'll see how module 1 requirements goes and comparison of Australia, Europe and USA. Response to the question. Now response to the question comes under section 1.0.3 within correspondence, wherein in EU there is a completely different section for module 1 response, and this is not at all applicable for US. Patent information, which comes under administrative information, patent certification 1.2.3 section that contains the information in Australian in AU. In EU it is not applicable, and in US the patent exclusivity will go under M1.3.5 under administrative information, which contains patent information, certification and exclusivity request. Medical information and labeling. Under Australian government Au-TGA, it is enhanced. There is an enhanced granularity and separation section for package, clean and annotation. In EU, European market, a complete different section for not to be in. There is no in-depth granularity in it. It directly goes into PI.doc under 1.3.1 SPC labeling PI. And in US, the labeling, only the labeling information is provided, and it goes as an XML file known as SPL under 1 and 1.14 labeling information. Now come pharmacovigilance information. Information relating to pharmacovigilance contains PV systems and risk management plan information in section 1.8.1 and 1.8.2 under business terminology. Under section 1.8.1 pharmacovigilance system and in 1.8.2 risk management would come under European market. In US, the information regarding risk management plans is provided under section 1.16. Now, how would sponsor information go? Under Australian market, information regarding change in sponsor and other information goes under section 1.2, which is not at all applicable in European market. And in US, the sponsor detail goes under section 1.3.1, application information with other details like change in address, change in contact agent and etc. Additional data are not generally given in Australian market, but in European market it will go under section 1.8 and which is not at all applicable in US as well. Meetings information would go under section 1.7, compliance with meeting and pre-submission, not applicable in Europe, and a total separate section would come under US market, which is under section 1.6. Now related sequence number. Related sequence number is absolutely mandatory for Australian market. For European market it's optional and it is not applicable in US market. About STF. STF also is required and comes under module 5 contains study related information. It is not applicable in Europe market, and in US the STF are required in US, and that it is a root element of STF is eCTD study, and which comes under module 5. A brief about STF would be STF in order to help identify all the files associated with study information is needed on each document, including the document title, subject matter, relationship to the other document, revision information, that is new, replace, delete or append, the location of the document and information on submission that included the documents all this information goes under STF. A separate STF for each study is submitted, and basically the STF is for smooth surfing of study related files. So the key points to remember in Australia in submission of eCTD in Australian market: firstly, STF. The sponsor do not require to provide STF, that is study tagging file, for evaluation. The content can be reused if at all submitted in other market regions where STF has been used. If the sponsor does this, it makes sure it conforms to ICF specification for study tagging file. A paper copy of cover letter should be included. Physical media containing the eCTD. eCTD application can be submitted with or without style sheet. Agency will not use the style sheet to review the content. The main important point is e-submission identifier. Send an email to e-submission TGA government with application detail, active ingredient and other information to get 6-number digit. For example, E12345 for e-submission identifier, which is the base folder of the submission. And what is baseline? Baseline submission, cover letter for the baseline submission. When making the baseline submission, you need to include a statement about each of the following points. Format used for the previous dossier. When the previous dossier was submitted, verify the formatting is the only change to previous dossier. All the information in baseline submission was in the previous version of the dossier. Any omission in the baseline submission do not cause the content. Use the sequence tag baseline and sequence description as reformat in envelope for baseline submission. These are the basic key points to remember while submitting the eCTD in Australian market. The other key points are technical key points, that is node extension. The use of node extension element is to define the structure beyond the heading element. Whenever the leaf element is allowed in the schema to organize multiple files which are needed under a normal eCTD heading. The node extension structure compiles with general ICH eCTD specification, but it is not a blanket permission to use without consideration. The node extension are a way of providing additional information in the sequence. Considering the impact of change in node extension structure during the life cycle, as this can lead a higher level of complexity and cumulative view of the submission. With using node extension for Australian market, only use node extension at the lowest level, at the level 5.3.5.1, but not at the level of 5.3. Do not use node extension in ICH specified subheadings, for example, which are already used, for example, excipients, manufacturer information, drug substance. All these places the node extension are not used. Now, few of the PDF properties: bookmarks, TOCs and hyperlink to be used while preparing the PDF. Bookmarks, we can increase the efficiency in evaluating the application if you prepare the documents so the agency can quickly locate the content. The agency recommends use of bookmarks, table of content to assist the use for the benefit of the navigation through PDF document to quickly find the information, including table of content, if appropriate, the table of tables, table of figures, and all on the first page itself of the document. Use of hyperlink when they would aid the evaluation in a way not already possible through the use of eCTD. Index.xml and table of content. However, be aware that hyperlinking can cause confusion later in the lifecycle management. Now, what are the lifecycle operations? There are few lifecycle operations, namely new, replace, delete and append. Agency encourages new, replace and delete. Only use of append as a part of study tagging file as defined in ICH-eCTD backbone file specification for study tagging file. If you use append for any other purpose, you will receive a validation warning. Need to include an explanation in the cover letter for the same. Note with specific lifecycle operation. For an example, 1.8.2 use lifecycle operation replace for risk management plans. However, in some instances, replace may not be appropriate. For example, when a new draft risk management plan is submitted for consideration, when a final document is submitted, it will replace the draft. Thus, it should be clear with which risk management plan is current approved plan. If you use lifecycle operation new, you will receive a validation warning on the same. Need to include a justification in cover letter. So these are the key points to be remembered while creating eCTD. Now there are few eCTD preparation tools. Agency do not mandate or recommend any particular software to prepare an eCTD submission. Recommendation by the agencies to the application, there are few points on it. Prepare the eCTD using an authenticated commercial eCTD preparation software. There is wide variety of options available, both in terms of multi-vendor and of approaches. For example, install software, software as service, and service providers. Find a solution which supports current and ongoing AU eCTD requirements and meets your overall business needs. Validates the prepared regulatory activity using an authenticate commercial eCTD validation tool. These validation tools are not just XML checkers or parser, but evaluate the technical content of regulatory activity validation tools. Validation tools should support checking current and ongoing eCTD requirements, minimize the possibility of technical validation errors, which can cause delays and overall regulatory process. On brief note, I would like to just give an introduction to one of the eCTD publishing tools, that is KnowledgeNet, which is a complete e-publishing software for creating, validating, publishing, and viewing the reports and generating eCTD XML files, which helps in creating eCTD needs, V-needs submission for US, EU, Gulf countries, Canada, South Africa, Switzerland, and many more countries. Uploading the documents, there are predefined selected templates for submission, which has autocorrect PDF property as well, and which helps in compiling the submission, which is country specific according to the regulatory requirements. It helps in generating and creating STF file and its management as well. Validation tool is to validate the sequence, and there is an eCTD validator tool as well. It helps in managing the complexity and multi-sequences with eCTD lifecycle management module, which is named as eCTD viewing tool. KnowledgeNet also provides installed software, software as service, and service providers. So it helps in preparing the eCTD easily and within the time-bound specification. So this completes the webinar. If you have any queries, please type in the chat box and within the control panel. One of the questions from the attendees is, what does this life cycle operation does when it is used? So firstly, when we are creating the submission, all the files would be new. If there is any queries from the agency, depending on the queries, the resubmission is done. So there are multiple options. As said, a life cycle operation, one is append, replace, and delete. All these things are used then after. So the first sequence would have new as lifecycle operation. One more question is, how are post-approval documents submitted in eCTD environment? Post-approval documents should be submitted as a new sequence as associated as a eCTD application. Baseline submission is when there is a transfer from NIS to eCTD. So there is a basic information and the transformation information provided in baseline submission, and all this information would go into the cover letter. That is the baseline submission. The third question is, are they accepting DMF in eCTD format? Yes, they do accept DMF in eCTD format. One more question is, when to ask for e-submission identifier, before PPF submission or later? I think it's PDF submission or later, right? No. Firstly, we have to acquire our eCTD identifier. As said earlier, I'll just show you the slide. This is the basic folder structure. So before the submission, we need to have e-submission identifier. After you're ready with all your application, you have to ask the agency for the e-submission identifier, and that would be the top level of folder. And within it, the sequence and the module 1 to module 5 folders would come. So it would be the first point, the beginning point of preparing the submission. Okay, one of the questions is, could you explain about study tagging file and node extension? So study tagging file is basically for the smooth review of the study files. The STF, which goes under module 5, there are few study related documents, and those are put in different nodes, and there's an XML file generated for each and every submission. And what is node extension? Now I'll explain node extension as and if you have any additional information to go within any of the nodes, you need to create one more node extension, or you need to create one more node which is always done at the leaf level, at the least level of the folder hierarchy. And after creating that node, or after creating the structure with that node under the structure, the PDF file is uploaded on it for any other additional information. One more question is, how far append operation is recommended in Australia? So firstly, I would like to clear the append operation. It is one type of an operation. If you want to provide any additional information in the submission, you use this append operation. And depending on the additional information, the append operation is used. If any, for any submitted document in earlier sequences, if you have submitted any document, and if you want to add more information on the significant document, append operation on that particular node or on that particular file would be would go. So the operation would be append at that moment. Au-TGA, both node extension and STF can be used. Yes, both the things are to be used, node extension as well as STF. One more question is, if we have to obtain e-submission identifier, do we have to register through TGA business mail for the same? We can use either of the option. We can mail or we can also register ourselves through TGA, and through that we can obtain the e-submission identifier. Okay. One more question is there any need to register in TGA e-business database if we are filing for first time? Yes, we need to do that. One more question, since append operation is not recommended in EU and US, so what about Australia? It has been recommended in EU and US both, and it goes in Australia as well. And this operation is recommended by ICH for all the agencies. One more question, from which date it is mandatory to use eCTD? The version 3.0 compulsory is from 1st January 2016. One more question is it mandatory to convert all previously approved paper submission to eCTD? No, it's not mandatory to convert your paper submission to eCTD, but it would be a good practice if the paper submission is transferred from paper submission to eCTD. And our recommendation is that any new application now, you should always start with eCTD. One more question, when to ask for e-submission identifier, before PDF submission or later? PPF, pre-submission planning form. Yes, before pre-submission planning form, you need to have your e-submission identifier. One more question is KnowledgeNet solution able to submit the dossier in all the versions? Yes, it has a capability of submitting and preparing the submission and dossier in all the versions with full validations in the system. One more question is, do we need to buy different tools for different regions? No, the solution, KnowledgeNet solution has structures of all the regions, and there's no separate tool for each region. In one solution, you get the structures of each all the regions. One more question is, as per ICH-eCTD 4.0 version, append is not going to be the required operation. Do you think TGA will also come up with similar updates in future? At present, there is no such guidelines given. It is in draft as yet, so there is no final version given by ICH for the append operation. And in future, when 4.0 version is acceptable, Australia would also follow the same guideline, 4.0 version of eCTD. One more question, can we have a trial version of KnowledgeNet eCTD software? We can have a separate demo for the solution, KnowledgeNet, as an eCTD software. We can you can contact us for the demo. One more question is, how competent is KNet, KnowledgeNet to other software? KnowledgeNet is a complete publishing tool with all the regional structure. It has other features as well. PDF properties are taken care of. There is an viewer for all the sequences. Lifecycle is managed. And there are many more features in KnowledgeNet. The documents are uploaded. All the audit trails are taken care of according to 21 CFR. There is one more basic feature and a very good feature of KnowledgeNet, that is query management. Whenever there is a response or query from the agency, it is easily being managed and response is met in a minimum period of time. So it has all the submission structure within it of all the regions. So the sponsor just have to prepare the PDF file and upload it to create and publish it with along with the envelope information. It's just the 3-step way to publish a dossier. Now the question is, does the TGA recommend the use of append operation in lifecycle management? No. So for this, and it comes from, and it is given from one of the websites of ICH, Australia. So the current version is going on of ICH is 3.2.2, which has append operation, but in life cycle. But when it moves to 4.0, even Australia would work on version 4.0 and would which would not require append operation. So currently, according to the version 3.2, append operation is there. When it when the 4.0 version comes up, the append operation will go, and Australia would work on it as well. One more question is on e-submission identifier. Just a minute. E-submission identifier information, please clarify on this. So the sponsor, the company needs an e-submission identifier before submitting the first regulatory activity of a dossier, of a sequence for an application in eCTD format. To obtain eCTD submission, we need to mail it to esubmission@tga.gov.au and include the information in your mail, that is applicant's name as listed in the EBS client database, name of the medicine, the AAN or proposed AAN or subject of master file, a description of application, application type, dosage form, if referring to medicine, name and address of manufacturing site, if referring to a master file. So this for getting this number, all this information would go in the mail to the agency. Agency will review this information and would give you the e-submission identifier for a single submission, for a single sequence or single dossier. So it is made up of 6 digits, letter and digits, and is valid throughout the entire life cycle of a product unless split from a packet as explained. Please share the presentation. One more question is, so it is like e-submission identifier information is something similar to ANDA, NDA number. Yes, it is similar to ANDA and NDA number. It is submission ID as known in US or tracking number in Europe. Do we have any more questions? Okay, thank you everyone. We have the same presentation tomorrow at 8 p.m. If you have any feedback or queries, you can go to the first link, and our website is knowledgenet.in, and you can contact us on the same. We are sharing the link on the chat box.